starting to fix the Denver Broncos. I think it's all going to start with the quarterback situation. What's happening at quarterback for the Denver Broncos? Of course, they're picking at 12, and they're in seemingly that no man's land as far as picking a quarterback. They've been linked to J.J. McCarthy a bunch, or whoever the QB4 is, right? If it's a Bo Nix, if it's J.J. McCarthy, if it's Michael Penix, if it's a later draft pick. But clearly, the Russell Wilson era is over. They're going to, officially, I don't know if they can trade him at this point, but they're going to move on at some point here. Quarterback has to be first order business for Sean Payton, George Payton, and the Broncos.
The Paytons.
All
I know is, boy, are Denver going to feel stupid when Russell Wilson wins 2 of the next 5 Super Bowls, like he says he wants to.
The guy's just confident, man.
He is confident.
I think 2 out of 5 is reasonable.
Yeah, it seems like a fair baseline for a guy that's got, 1?
Yeah.
In his career?
Yeah. I mean,
how many quarterbacks have even won 2 ever?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he says. I'm impressed by that level.
Matters a bit.
I'm impressed by the level of confidence.
Delusion.
Yeah. Because
this is a man that doesn't even know where he's playing yet says he figures he can win 2 of the next 5.
Bringing the rings with him.
2 of the next 5 is the goal.
He's bringing the rings with him. Everyone else is like, he's on the decline. Russ has lost a step. He's like, no, I'm better than ever. It's better than ever. Anyway, what's Denver going to do here, man?
Yeah, I keep comparing them a little bit to last year's Raiders in terms of they sort of predetermined the outcome of the quarterback plan without the other side of the equation. They're like, right, we've had enough of this guy. We're moving on from Derek Carr / Russell Wilson. We're going in a different direction. And everyone is kind of like on the outside, sure, that makes some sense. That's reasonable. Mm-hmm. They have a level. You probably can't win a Super Bowl with those guys, or at least your chances are very low. So what's your plan? We don't have one yet. We're still working on it. And the Raiders, that was a catastrophe last year. They didn't have a plan. They didn't manage to execute any of their plans, whatever they would have been, and they ended up with Jimmy G as their starting quarterback. Denver, you could say they maybe are slightly better positioned, but they're picking lower down. They still have Russell Wilson, his contract on the books. They might be even worse positioned than the Raiders were to get their quarterback. So I think it's entirely understandable to decide that they're moving on from Russell Wilson, though the way that they did it and how early in the process they did it is perhaps a little bit less easy to defend. But they need to find a quarterback, and I don't know, are they just stuck having to pick one at 12?
Probably.
Or getting hyper-aggressive and doing the trade-up thing.
I was looking at the trade-up. So 12
they don't have a lot of picks.
12-3 is where the 49ers moved, right, from to go get Trey Lance.
Right.
And so from 12-3, that's where Denver's at 12. They have a normal allotment of picks.
And that cost them 2 additional first-round picks on top of 12.
Yeah. So they don't have a second because of Sean Payton.
Right.
They have 7 total picks. The other tricky part, and I mentioned this for another team some other time. It's probably on the South episode, so I will mention this in the future on Wednesday. They only picked 5 times last year. They have 14 draft picks on the team they've picked 14 times over the last 2 years. That's not bad, but they haven't had Denver a first round pick either of the last 2 seasons, and last year had only 5 total draft picks. Usually at teams that don't have high picks, top 50 picks, multiple years in a row, that starts to come back to bite. That hurts the roster depth. So you're already in kind of a roster depth crunch because of previous years, because of the Russell Wilson trade. So if you want to make another big trade up from, say, 12-3 and give up more future first-round picks to secure a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels, again, there's just you have to do so much else on top of that, reaccumulating draft picks, hitting in the middle rounds, the Rams strategy of not just, forget the picks, go get the, trade your first rounders. It's forget the picks. That's what that means, right? F them picks.
I'm sure it is.
Forget them picks.
Sure, that's what it means.
But you got to hit on the middle rounds. You got to hit in round 3, round 4, round 5. So it just puts a little bit more pressure. I don't think Denver's in a good position to trade up, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and they're not even in a position to do that whole, well, let's grab a guy in the second round, right? If they are passing on a quarterback, in the first. They're passing on one until round 3, probably.
This was the Panthers a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Where they had pick 6 and then pick 103 or whatever it was. And it was like you could pick Kenny Pickett at 6 or wait. And they ended up spinning 103 into somewhere in the 90s, whatever it was, and they got Matt Corral.
Right.
Right. So they hedged, and Carolina,
and that earned them the number 1 overall pick.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Denver's in a tough spot. So I think someone's, the more we talk through this, someone's really in play at 12. The J.J. McCarthy hype is through the roof. I've heard I see mixed feelings from around the league and from general analysts about J.J.
Is that a realistic strategy for them to essentially pass on a quarterback to deliberately be terrible this year and actually plan to have the number 1 overall pick in a year's time?
I don't know. So George Payton in particular he predated Sean Payton.
Yeah, but that would a lot of the ills of this team would be solved by essentially a full hard reset to get rid of all this, the cap contract situation for Russ, to just stink for a year and plan to be in place to actually rebuild this thing next year.
If we're playing this game from the perspective of what's best for the Denver Broncos, we know we're the owners of the Denver Broncos, which is different from
we're the Waltons.
Yes, from being George Payton.
Just money as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, tons of money.
Great,
right? If that was, I'd be the GM.
Just like Jerry.
Yeah, I'd be doing it myself.
Right.
And we'd win. I wouldn't be doing this podcast with you.
No.
All right, but let's just pretend. Are we doing this from ownership's perspective, or George Payton's perspective, or Sean Payton's perspective?
Well,
right?
My question would be, so if that was, let's say that's somebody's strategy. Somebody looks at this objectively and says, the best thing this team can do is to stink next year, right? Actually go out there deliberately, pass on a quarterback, grab a foundational piece at 12, and next year is when we're actually going to try and fix this whole thing.
We would never put this strategy in writing for fear of losing draft picks like the Dolphins. We would only have this discussion, say, at Prime 47 in Indianapolis, in the dark corner of the steakhouse where you could talk and not have it on the record.
Sure.
Just for, clarity.
But so if somebody pitches this in a boardroom in Denver somewhere, right? Who's the person that balks? Because
GM George Payton.
Yeah, but
he
But that's the thing.
Made the big investment for Russell Wilson. That failed.
Right.
This is his last chance.
Yeah, but is it? So if ownership,
Maybe.
if Sean Payton and ownership are both on board, then surely George Payton, just by going along with it, is fine. Or is he is there a recognition that, hey, Sean Payton and the Waltons get together, right, at a country club somewhere, as is their wont, and say, hey, look, I got an even better plan than this. We're going to stink next year. We're going to pass on a quarterback. We're going to blow this whole thing up. We're going to get the number 1 overall pick. We're going to reset the roster and the salary cap, right? It'll be a disaster, and that'll put us in prime position to rebuild in a year's time. And we'll have a ready-made scapegoat because we could fire George and say it's all his fault.
If I've learned anything about business through my years, it's that's the play, right? You go right to the boss, scheme a little bit, get on their good side, and that's how that's the power play. So we're not fixing the Broncos right here. All we're talking about for 10 minutes is a little Sean Payton power
play.
Way
you can design next year to be the big rebuild, and you can make it look like it's an accident and somebody else's fault along the way. It's the perfect scheme.
Yeah. Question from Drew in the chat is, what if they go get their guy? That has to be a solid move, right? I'm of the mind that
if you trade up to 3.
Yeah.
The same. We've kind of covered that for a couple of different teams already, right? I have massive concerns with the idea of trading up from 12 to 3 to go and get a quarterback, because it's probably going to be QB3 in this draft. Now, that doesn't mean he isn't QB1 on your board. And if that's somehow how it pans out, I don't think you can hate that. If Trey Lance was the number 1 quarterback on the 49ers board, and they were which is not the way it worked. They traded so far in advance that they basically, it's not the way it worked. But
they may have wanted Mac Jones.
Yeah. If we got to pick number 3 and whoever it is still on the board, right? And that's when Denver make the move, because they're like, holy crap, the best quarterback in the draft is still available at number 3. Let's go make it happen. I wouldn't hate that. I think it's still aggressive. And now with the last couple of years with Bryce Young, et cetera, you can sound a note of caution that, hey, if we give up so much to go get this guy, can we even capably put a team around him or are we self-sabotaging by doing this? If that was the way it worked out, I don't think you can kill the plan, but the chances are it's not going to be the number one quarterback on their board. The chances are it's probably 2 or 3, at which point trading what's going to end up being the guts of 3 first-round picks to go get the third best quarterback available, just in addition to the fact that you don't have the ability to put a roster around him, does not feel like sound strategy.
All right, we can go round and round on the QB situation. The other thing I'll bring up here is I wonder if Baker Mayfield is a fit if he doesn't go back to Tampa Bay. If Sean Payton says, yeah, I can work with him, right? If Sean Payton says, I can work with Baker Mayfield and get the most out of him.
Wouldn't you just keep Russ if that was where you were?
Nah, they're trending in different directions.
Are they?
Russ had good stats last year. I don't think he played all that well.
He played better than he did the year before.
There
which
is
means
something
he's trending upwards, which is the same as Baker.
I will say, like, if you just look at Russ's production and his stats and you didn't watch the games, you could say, well, Sean Payton elevated another quarterback. He took a guy.
And he did. Even if you watch the games, he elevated it.
He was better. Yeah,
right.
I mean, he definitely was better. The thing is, when you're in the division with the Chiefs and now with Jim Harbaugh in the Chargers and Justin Herbert, the reason why Denver might have to make this aggressive move is because how are you going to compete? How are you going to compete? And at some point, what the Raiders should have done a couple years ago, as we said, if you're going to move on from Derek Carr, it should have been probably 2 years ago, and you just have to go get the next guy that can compete with Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Which isn't Baker.
No, I know that. This is like 2 different ideas rolled into one. Would they want Baker, or would they literally want that big reset? My problem is the organizational structure might not.
I can't see an argument
lend itself to that.
I can't see a good case for moving on from Russ to replace him with Baker.
Okay, so let's say they're going to, for the sake of time, we're going to draft somebody at 12.
So we're just grabbing QB4.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, either way, a shot has to be taken on a quarterback. A chance has to be taken.
I mean, what happens if they're gone? Like, we're very likely in a situation where QBs go at least 1-2, maybe 1-2-3, and then anybody ahead of you needs a QB or trades ahead of you to get a QB. You're out of luck.
Maybe free agents. I mean, maybe the way things fall is what dictates your potential tank strategy. Like, you signed Jacoby Brissett.
I mean, this is what the Raiders did. This is exactly what the Raiders did. They were like, well, let's...
But they tried. Look, the Raiders tried to do different things, right? They tried to trade up. They talked about going to... They had these same conversations we're having.
What I'm saying is...
They just failed at it. I don't think they chose to. They just didn't get there.
Right. But that's
not everybody can go get the quarterback.
That's exactly what we've just described. Denver is kind of stuck at 12. They don't want to trade up to 3 because that would be vaguely suicidal. So they're kind of going to let the board fall as it may. And if it falls in that way... they end up like the Raiders, where they have no solution.
This is an awful place to be.
Yeah.
I do wonder. I mean, I'm sure people criticize us, and I don't know if that's where the question was, where we always say, go get the quarterback, go get the quarterback. But yeah, like if it doesn't work out, I mean, I don't hate the Russell Wilson move a couple of years ago. Maybe the restructure of the contract and tying yourself to him. That's where the touchy-feely stuff, I think, needs to go away, right? Like, just keep proving it. Like the Packers did a great job with Jordan Love. I'll give you a little bit so you're confident, but we're not going to invest in you. We're not going to give you this long-term deal till you prove it. That was where they screwed up.
Well, so is the Packers' Jordan Love strategy actually the answer? Let's draft a quarterback lower down that we believe can actually sit for a year, maybe longer, and then next year we already have our quarterback, and we probably stink because we had to start.
Yeah, draft 2 quarterbacks. Draft J.J. McCarthy and then Spencer Rattler in the 3rd if he's available.
Well, that's
because
what I'm
you need to find somebody. The rest of the roster doesn't matter. You're going to win 6 games until you find a quarterback.
Max. That's what I'm saying. Maybe Spencer Rattler is the play. Like, and not even J.J. Like J.J. Let's say J.J. McCarthy is gone at 12, right? Atlanta picked him. Whoever, the Giants picked him. Somebody has taken J.J. McCarthy. All 4 quarterbacks are off the board before 12 rolls around. At 12, you pick whatever, the best defender off the board. You grab Spencer Rattler in the 3rd round, and you're going to have to start this year with some bad quarterback that you don't love.
Jacoby Brissett. Drew Lock coming back.
I think Brissett's still on a roster, right?
He's listed on our free agent board.
Oh, really?
So our free agent board, sometimes Brad takes a little poetic license and anticipates cuts.
Right.
So I don't know if that's part of it, but I'm seeing Jacoby Brissett on our board here.
Okay. I don't think you want to start him.
Copy-paste that conversation and just insert Raiders for Broncos. It's the same conversation for the Raiders.
This year?
Yes. When we talk about them in an hour, when we get to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's the same conversation, isn't it?
I mean, it's vaguely, yeah.
They're one pick apart. The difference is the Raiders have an Aiden O'Connell that theoretically showed a little something, and
they've already done this dance.
And they have done this dance. All right, the rest of the Denver roster. Biggest free agent's probably Josie Jewell, a linebacker.
They are being talked about as a team that could trade Patrick Surtain II. Would you do that?
Unless it helped facilitate getting me a quarterback, I would not. I think he's one of the most valuable non-QBs in the league right now.
I mean,
even when you pay him,
it could either help facilitate that deal, right? 12-3 instead of a first-round pick, you're giving up Surtain. It could also potentially mesh with if your country club meeting aligned on let's stink this year and be better in the future, it might also make sense to trade him away now and stockpile.
Yeah, I guess the thing I'm struggling with is knowing that Sean Payton's the head coach, got paid a ton of money, and I'm picturing him coming from Nolans as impatient, right? And
yeah.
George Payton in this like crossroads in his career is being impatient. So I'm having a tough time reconciling the motivation of the decision makers here with what's best for the Broncos. If you're telling me what's best for the Broncos, what the Dolphins did a couple of years ago, remember when the Dolphins always had 2 or 3 first-round picks for like a 3-year stretch?
Right.
The Eagles went through that where they had 2 first-round picks and they kept flipping them. They just kept multiplying those assets. That would be the other play. If you could show patience, and copy and paste this for the Raiders as well, if you can show patience and continue to flip your first-round picks into the future and have 2 and then have 3 and have 2 and have 3, that's the other play that I would be completely in for if we're talking about doing what's best for the Broncos.
Which is like the opposite of the way the Saints behaved.
Complete opposite. That's why I'm having a tough time saying, oh, yeah, that's something Sean Payton would do.
But I do. So it's weird because I think you're right that Sean Payton generally, character-wise, is more of the impatient variety of human than the other way. On the other hand, because of how they acquired him, right, traded for him, in theory, he's the guy that's going to put this all back together, endless money from the Waltons, and therefore sort of endless financial patience. It feels like he's got more security than basically probably any coach in the NFL at this point, right? Other than like Andy Reid. But like Sean Payton, if he showed up to the country club and said, this is the plan, right? We are going to stink this year. I'm sorry, but that's the best way of fixing this team. I feel like the ownership would buy it.
Yeah. I mean,
because what are they going to do? Go, no, sorry, you need to win like 8 games this year, otherwise we fire you.
A complete reset is the way to go. I mean, even from a cap space perspective, it's not like they're not going to be massive players in free agency. Last year they were. Remember, they went out and got Mike McGlinchey and they got Ben Powers and they got Zach Allen. They were big players in free agency. That's a lot of money just to find some solid starters, right? And Ben Powers, McGlinchey, and Allen. Cap space wise, they're not in a great spot.
No.
So, I mean, look, if they had a new GM and a new head coach, right? And it was like, oh, of course, this is a new regime. They could be patient.
Right.
They would start from scratch. They would say, let's reset this
Instead,
thing. Let's start flipping picks into the future, and let's reset the cap situation.
Instead,
I think that's what they should do.
An incumbent GM and a head coach who just doesn't tend to operate that way, who they paid a lot to go and get.
Yeah.
So what does that result in? I think fixing the Broncos, if we were running it, we would advocate a complete and total hard reset this year.
Yes.
And not chasing a quarterback.
I think the Raiders are in a similar boat. Again, when we get there.
Except they should have done it a year ago.
Yeah. They're going to think they're closer. We're going to talk about the Raiders in a minute. I don't have much. Like, what else do we want to talk about with Denver? The Surtain thing's interesting because if we do a hard reset, I still think he's a part of the core.
I mean, he could be, absolutely.
Unless you're getting if I was in Carolina a couple years ago and I had Brian Burns, I don't want Brian Burns on that big second contract. I would have flipped him for the 2 firsts if that was really on the table.
Yeah.
If Surtain was offered, if I got 2 firsts for Surtain, which I think he's better and more valuable than Burns, I would consider that. But Surtain's part of my future. I'm good with locking him up. But if I could get 2 firsts to help facilitate that, then I would.
I mean, I think that's the thing. You are at the minimum. You are listening to the phone calls on Surtain.
Jalen Ramsey type deal. Like, is he? Yeah. He doesn't have the same hype as Jalen Ramsey, but he is good.
Right.
He's
like
very
you're not actively shopping Patrick Surtain, but you're listening to offers at this point. So our plan is complete and total reset, rebuild. punt on quarterback this year. We'll draft Spencer Rattler in the 3rd round. We're not planning on playing him this year.
Yeah.
Spencer Rattler will be riding the bench and developing Jordan Love style. And then hopefully next year he's got something. And if somebody wants to blow us away with a crazy offer for Patrick Surtain, we'll take it. But
I like it. So that's
otherwise,
good.
we're looking to lock him up long term.
Sometimes I like these as just we're having the conversations that I think they're probably having,
and that
in a very condensed form here. We're having it, but we're trying to have those conversations with all these options on the table. What's the best one?
And that deal absolutely starts with multiple first-round picks.
Yeah, if not, then
one first-round pick doesn't get it done.
If not, I'll pay him the $20 million and be happy with a lockdown corner.
Right.